Modern animism makes the oldest spiritual belief easy for today's seekers to understand, practice, and live. Stay tuned and grow with us. I've been doing a lot of investigating into the paranormal world, and one of the things that everyone's curious about is the other world. Now, when I say other world, I mean the non physical world. So that could be heaven, it could be hell, or it could be anything in between, or none of those things. And here today to shed some light on that is channel, medium, and astral travel, Katherine Gillette. Can you tell us what your life was like before you learned how to do all this?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I
Oh,
always
sure.
appreciate the opportunity to shed light on things and just share my experiences, and hopefully they can be helpful for people. I was 12 years old when I started experiencing things that I couldn't explain. And it all started with checking out a book at the library that laid out a meditation practice for what at the time they were calling soul travel, which as a little girl I just thought sounded cool. It was a basic meditation practice, the kind that you can find pretty much anywhere nowadays. But for whatever reason, I decided to take up as a hobby practicing meditation. And it wasn't long before I started to be able to feel energy, all of the types of things that go along with meditation. But I also got with that my first knowing. And I've always just called it getting the knowing, but I think nowadays they call it getting a download. In those days, we weren't downloading anything. So I always just called it getting the knowing. But what the knowing said was, you're not really in to begin with. Your body, the human body, is not a jam jar. You're not stuck inside of it. And the full concept of the knowing was like more like a like consciousness is more like a radio station. You're tuned to physical reality. But if you know where the dial is, you can actually adjust it and tune yourself into any frequency that you want to, which at the time didn't make a lot of sense to me. But not long after that, was lying on the couch just reading a book and went to shift my body position to roll over. And I thought I had just fallen off of the couch. But when I stood up and turned around, my body was still laying there exactly where it had been. So that was the first time that I had gotten out of my body
So let's
almost
stop there
by.
for a second because
Mhm,
I have listened to different YouTubes of people who are trying to do this stuff. So it wasn't just for like curiosity, but they're have an intention. I really want to do this,
mhm.
and they talk about being scared. You know, like something starts to happen, and they're just like, "Oh, what's going on? I'm so scared." Did you have that? And if you did, what were you experiencing that before it actually worked?
In For me, in my experience, I was just, I was so young at the time that for a long time before it actually happened, I had been just playing with building up pressurized like energy. I thought it was such a cool feeling, and I found I had almost unlimited stores of it that I could pull it in from other places. And it almost felt like pushing against my body, like, pushing and pushing and trying, that trying feeling. And then once I actually integrated the knowing, it was like there's nothing you don't have to push against anything. There's nothing to push against. It's actually more of a dissipation feeling and a little I don't even know, sort of sucking out feeling like you almost kind of pop out. Definitely it feels so unusual and so uncomfortable at first, right? The waking human ego personality is all designed to keep us feeling safe and secure. And so building up the flexibility of thought process to feel more comfortable doing that type of thing, it just takes practice. It's like stretching. Like if you wanted to be able to do the splits, you wouldn't expect to do it on the first try or be able to have that flexibility of your muscles to you would know that you have to work up to stretching out those muscles and gaining that flexibility. And in my experience, working with the flexibility of the ego personality to feel more comfortable in non-corporeal situations is similar. So what I would say to anybody who's attempting it but feels scared is that that feeling will subside, just like your muscles feel uncomfortable at first when you're learning to stretch out and gain flexibility. In time, that feeling will subside and it won't feel as scary or destabilizing in order to do it. It just takes some practice.
Okay. So I'm not an astral traveler. I've not had any experience remotely similar to that. I've heard that the sleep paralysis feeling
Mhm.
is part of is like a prelude, like, okay, you're on your way. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, sleep paralysis is kind of it's coming at it from the opposite direction, like you've been asleep, so your body isn't moving. It's paralyzed, but you become conscious or awake while still in that state. So in that case, you could just sit up and get out of your body if you really realized that you could. Many people who experience sleep paralysis experience that very confining and frightening feeling, but I was always like, anytime I tangled with, like, a sleep paralysis demon, I was never trapped inside of my body. I could get out of my body and get out of the situation.
Okay. You said sleep paralysis demon. We got to talk about that. So tell me about that.
Okay, so the next thing that happened after I was able to get out of my body, and I didn't have very good control over it at all. It would happen kind of sporadically and not at all on purpose at first. But I thought it was a neat enough result, right? Like in my adolescent brain, I was like, if this is real, I wonder what else is real, right? And so it was back to the library for me. And I checked out a book on ancient Gaelic rites and set up my little circle and all of my little things. And for whatever reason, I had decided that I was going to practice this on summoning fairies, which sounded cute to me. And I was really thinking Tinkerbell, you know? So I went through the whole thing and did this ritual, and because I had already the experience of gathering up all of this pressurized energy, I got the keen idea that that's what I was going to do. And I released all of the energy into the words that I was saying, and it felt very powerful and I felt very intentioned and yeah, nothing happened. I was very disappointed in this result. So I just sort of left it as is until that night when I was doing my nightly meditation, and I ended up flung out of my body all the way across the room. And standing up in the dark, I turned around to look at my body back on the bed, and hunched over it was this looming dark figure that was pressing itself like over my body, and I was absolutely terrified. You can imagine, like, I tried to flee, but I didn't have very control over my astral state, so I tried to run only to end up back in my body, only to wind up right back out of my body with the thing still in the room, only to wind up right back in my body again, and that would happen 5, 6 times a night for weeks, for months on end, that I would be out of my body with this presence in the room.
That must have been
And
terrifying.
that was absolutely terrifying. And you can imagine the adverse effects. I was losing sleep.
Sure.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go to school in the morning. I was exhausted. And I remember I finally got frustrated or angry enough at the situation that I was like, "What are you? Like, what do you want?" And it said its name and it said, "You're mine." And I panicked and went and confessed to my mom. And and I don't know what it is about teenagers where I didn't wanna tell her what I had been doing in my room, you know what I mean? Like, it sounds like crazy stuff. I was raised in an agnostic family, so, like, they didn't believe in any of this anyway, and I didn't wanna tell anybody, but at that point, I was absolutely horrified and just and needed my mom. So, I went and told my mom. Fortunately, she was understanding enough not to tell my dad, because that would have gone very badly. Um, but we tried all kinds of different avenues and all kinds of different spiritual practitioners, but everyone we went to wasn't really able to offer us any kind of answers or solutions. And ultimately, there was no help for me. There was nothing anyone could do about it. Not my mom, not any kind of people that we were able to talk to. I just had to figure out how to deal with it.
And so what'd you do?
Well, there was another interesting side effect that happened. As it turns out, a door once opened can be passed through in both directions, and the nature of my regular dreams began to change. I ended up triggering lucid dreaming because I was able to sense personalities, other energy signatures when they were in my vicinity. I think I had become so used to being able to sense that thing in the room with me, like anytime it was there, I knew before I could even see it that it was there, that I would be in a regular dream. And I remember the first time it ever happened was a friend of mine. I was, you have dreams and people are there, and person was my friend. And I looked at her and I looked into her eyes and I said, "You're not Kristen. Who the hell are you?" And it looked at me and smiled, this big, twisted Joker smile, and just started laughing at me. And again, creepy. Like, I was terrified. But it continued to happen where I would look at someone in my dream and be like, "You're not my mom, or you're not my brother. Who are you?" And they would answer me. It's like they would look at me and go, "Oh, you're right. I'm not, but maybe we should wake you up now." I had one show up next to me and I was like, "Who are you?" And it looked at me and said, "Oh, you can see me? Well, good for you. They look
So
for people like you."
that suggests that some sort of intelligence invades dreams for some purpose. I don't know what that purpose might be, but would you agree with that?
That was my assessment of the situation for a long time. See, I had been taught that dreams were happening inside my head. So, my assessment of the situation was exactly the same as you just said. What are you doing in my head? Why are you in my dreams? And over the course of long periods of time, two things happened. One, the quote unquote sleep paralysis demon never actually went away. And as a matter of fact, more of them were attracted. I've dealt with so many of those personality constructs over the years, I can't even count. But I also began to learn from the personalities I was interacting with in my dream states how to better cope and deal with the situation. It was and I always just called them the others because I never came from any spiritual tradition. I didn't have words like angels and guides to apply to the situation or, light beings or anything like that. I always just called them the others because in my perspective, they were that which was inside my head that wasn't me. But they were able to offer me insight into how to control my astral states better. I was able to move around. I was able to manipulate energy, manipulate the environment. I was able to create portals and move out of situations I didn't want to be in. And most importantly, I realize now, but at the time I didn't realize it, was I was taught and put through scenarios on how to move through and deal with the fear, how to control my own energy and my own levels of fear. And for many, many years, I was somewhat bitter and angry. Why are you in my head? What is going on? Why won't you answer my questions? I was very upset about it. And I remember I was having a particular sort of meltdown over it when I was driving home one day, and I was screaming in my car, like, "Why? Why are you in my head? It's my energy, it's my head, it's why are you in my head? Why are you doing this?" And it was the first time I had ever experienced embodiment channeling, where suddenly a voice that wasn't my voice came out of my mouth saying things that I wasn't thinking. And what it said is not in, you're out. You're out trying to help you. And that's when I realized that it had never been a dream. It had always been extra dimensional travel. I had always been out.
Can you say more about that? I'm not tracking.
What I had always assumed was a dream. How do I say this well? And again, I will precurse this by saying that what you're getting is my interpretation of events, right? Like
Sure. Yeah,
I think anybody who tells you they know for sure what's going on is trying to sell you a book.
I agree.
So, this is my interpretation of what I came to understand about it, but I'm not sure dreams are happening inside your head.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm a lucid dreamer too, so yes.
Um, I think it may well be that it's a shifted state of consciousness where we're experiencing a more fluid state of reality, and I was just aware of personalities that other people were not aware of, and because of that, they didn't really have any choice but to interact with me because I noticed that they were there.
Hmm.
Some of them were helpful and kind, some of them were very much like, "Yeah, I don't work here," and didn't wanna talk to me, you know what I mean? But overall, they had always been trying to help me and not terrorize me, at least those ones.
Okay, so are there any dangers to astral travel or lucid dreaming? And if so, how does somebody stay safe? Because you seem unscathed.
Yeah, no, I came through it okay. Over time, I learned how to deal with the other kinds of, sometimes people call them shadow people too, or sleep paralysis demons, which really involves, again, like releasing the fear and remaining calm. But is there any chance of physical harm coming to you from any of these experiences? Not in my experience. I've never been physically harmed in
I
any
agree.
way.
Yeah.
Um, I think though we're, at a stage of society now that we understand that the only kind of harm there isn't physical harm. There's
Yeah.
also emotional and psychological harm that can happen, and sometimes those forms of harm can be more insidious in a way because, if you break your arm, the doctor can look at it, tell you your arm is broken and put a cast on you. But for emotional or psychological trauma, it's much harder to diagnose and much harder to treat. We're not quite at the stage where we're, fully understanding consciousness and the depths of trauma and really the best ways to treat it. So are you in any physical danger from this? I would say no. I would say that if if whatever is out there was trying to harm me in any way, they would have done it by now. Or if
Yes.
they were, you know what I mean? So I don't
Yes.
think that's a thing. But it can be traumatizing and frightening and emotionally hurtful to go through some of these experiences. So,
Were you traumatized?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was terrified, for a long time, and certain kinds of personalities, they fear is a very powerful energy.
Yeah.
Anger is a very powerful energy, even in some cases, lust. That's why you
Yes.
have, like, like incubus and succubus stories like that that come these are very powerful human energies, which is why those are the energies that are being, uh, poked and prodded at. That's what they want, is the most forceful of energies they can get out of you.
Well, and
And
there's
frank
people who kind of glorify that and talk about what great spirit lovers they have, and they want it and they invite it.
I mean, I really try to remain non-judgmental about other people's paths. I mean, everybody's path to learning and enlightenment is their own journey.
Absolutely.
So I can't really pass judgment on it, but there's definitely I would be wary of those kinds of interactions because they are semi-parasitic.
I agree.
It's not going to physically harm you in any way, probably, but it's also how do I say this? You don't know what you're feeding.
Yes.
So I don't think it's wise. I was certainly advised by the others that certain kinds of activities are the translation I got was certain things are frowned upon. And there's a reason why they're frowned upon. Contributing, at least in my experience and just from having interacted and talking with eventually you go from from fear to helplessness and from helplessness to anger and from anger into, sort of whatever. Are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this? Like, what are you even?
I
What do
can
you
track with
want?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you sort of get to this place where you're like, what are you? Like, what do you even want? And the fear is gone, the anger is gone. It's really just exasperation at some point. And that's the point at which some of them actually began to talk to me and tell me things. And some of what they were saying was no. Like, obviously, that's not the case. You know, if you were some kind of evil demon that was going to take over my body, you would have done it by now. And I can feel that mostly what you feel is kind of sad and lonely. And you almost get the feeling off of it like it's kind of, yeah, like sad and parasitic. It's not, you know, there was no real power there once I got over giving them my power, if that makes sense. Like, once I was done giving them my energy, giving them my power, there was no real power there. It was really just kind of lame to be sucking energy off of another life form. It really just felt kind of lame. And But as to why they want it or the impression that I get is they're trying to gain their own energy momentum back for whatever reason. Either they can't cross over or they can't be born again. They're kind of stuck in this weakened energy state. And the impression I got is what they really want is to be able to move out of that limbo state or that in between energetic state where they're not really in any one place. So, again, like, I don't recommend it, you don't know what you're feeding.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And if that's where their energy is, I can only assume there's a reason why.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, it sounds like you're saying that there are helpers there.
there
Tell
are,
tell me
yeah.
about those beings.
How do I say this well? Because again, I never really interpreted the entire situation as angels and guides or light
Right.
beings. It
Yeah.
wasn't how I was raised. And so the designations I sort of got off of them where there were those who work there and those who don't.
Okay.
It was almost like being in a if you walked into a Target, some of the people in Target will be like, "Hi, how can we help you today? Welcome to Target. Yes, let's get," there was a very accompanied log line happening. And then some of the people were just customers, like bystanders, like, "Yeah, I don't work here, so leave me alone." You know what I mean? Or, varying responses. Some would just run away and didn't want to talk to me at all. Some would be like, "Yeah, you can do this or that," but they weren't really engaged. So, the impression I got is that there are those personality constructs out there that hail from different kinds of realities, but sort of have the purpose, or I don't want to call it a job, it's because I feel like it's more like a choice. They choose to work with and interact with humans who end up in their space. there seems to be a broader knowledge or an understanding that while we as humans are spiritual beings, not unlike them, that while we're physically focused here, it's like a limiting, it's almost like we have our blinders up. So when we are in non-physical spaces, we sort of don't have our bearings, especially if we're conscious in those non-physical spaces. It's very awkward and clumsy for us to be there while we're still physically focused here. And they're there to assist and help things along. It's like a chosen purpose for some of them.
Okay. So you've had some experiences with people who have died. Can you tell us how you came upon them? So were they clients or just somebody you bumped into in the other world?
No, I've never done professional services or hired myself out at all, but I do get one of the things I learned how to do, or one of the things I was taught by the others early on, is that, well, the words that they used was any of the mirrors are step throughable, but it really relates to any portal, any seeing, any vision. So, and I also get, waking visions and see things, and the energy of any one of those visions, if it's calling itself to you, you can project yourself or will yourself through any one of those visions that come through. And on occasion, when I feel called to one of them, what I'm stepping into is a transition situation, is how I would word that. And usually it's somebody who has experienced a death that is somewhat confusing. It either happened suddenly, so they didn't have time to process what was happening, or it happened under a strenuous situation, so that they're, still their energy is still in the situation that just happened. Sometimes if you have something like a natural disaster that happens, or the situation was so strenuous and stressful, they may well still have their energy in that physical situation instead of realizing what's happened. And the impression that I get from it is that on occasion, that vibration, that panicked vibration, or that just completely confused vibration is so different from the frequency of the others, which is, this is all a very peaceful and none of that going on, that they have difficulty communicating. They can't quite get through or reach somebody because it's like trying to be on this slow, steady wavelength with somebody who is like all over the place with their wavelength. So they're just having difficulty communicating, and on occasion, it helps having somebody like myself, who's a physically focused human, who can get with that crazy vibration in order to get in there and help kind of guide it to a place where the others can reach that situation and help guide that person onward. So, for example, I once stepped into one of those visions where I found myself sitting in the passenger seat of a gentleman who was just gripping the steering wheel and staring at a concrete barrier. So the impression I got is this was a vehicle accident, and but he had immediately energetically just recreated the situation and was confused, like what just happened. So for him, once he realized I was there, I was like, "It's okay, but I think we need to get out of the car and move beyond that barrier." So I just kind of helped him out of the car and helped him walk past, and he had envisioned a literal concrete barrier. People will create whatever imagery is trying to help them understand what happened, and so he had literally created a concrete barrier, and I think we need to get out of the car and walk beyond the barrier. So there's usually some element of movement or travel that happens with it. It just helps a physically focused personality understand that there is a transition happening. And then once I got to the other side with him, he recognized, I got images and flashes of him as a child playing with a little drum that he had had, and feelings that came up. And when he looked at me, he was like, "Oh, it's you." And I just said, "Oh, yeah, of course it is. You remember I used to watch you when I was a child." And I produced the little drum in my hand and I was like, "Here, see?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "I think we need to walk along though." And I to me, it looked like a long hallway, like a tunnel with names written all down the sides of it, but I'm not sure what it appeared like to him. The experience is really very different for all different kinds of people. And I just kind of delivered him at the end of the tunnel to walk in, and I wrote my name at the end of it and walked back. I was like, "This is as far as I go. You got to go on in." So But those experiences, vary from person to person. It all depends on what somebody needs to see or needs to hear, but it's usually a situation where transition was either sudden or stressful, and they just need a little bit of help getting their energy back on a wavelength where the others can reach them and take the process forward, usually.
So, how has these types of experiences influenced your relationship with death?
Oh gosh, I don't have a relationship with death because I know there's no such thing.
Okay.
And that may be a lot to say for some people, and that's completely okay. People are at different places with everything, different walks, different journeys, right? But
Well,
for
there is a
me,
transition, though, and there is a point at which your body doesn't function in this realm anymore.
yes, that's correct. Yeah, there will be a point where the physical construct doesn't function anymore. But I feel like, for me anyway, and it's, every person has to make their own relationship with that concept, right? But for me, I don't know for sure. I've experienced my own death on a number of occasions. I feel like that may have been part of the training for doing all of this, but I've certainly experienced that on a couple of occasions. I don't know if they were from previous lives or if it was, I don't know what exactly that was, but the feeling of it was not all that different, once there was the letting go of the physical form. There's like a moment of panic there. But the experience beyond that was not that different from astral travel or lucid dreaming if you're comfortable with it. Once the ego personality is comfortable operating in a non-physical environment, that shift is it's not all that different. So,
But how did you experience your own death?
I again once again stepping into various visions or things that were there, it was
Uh,
like, and I don't know if I've never been sure if that was like I'm experiencing the passing that I had from a previous life so that I can remember it, or if sometimes what happens too is I'll end up inside a spirit, a personality's experience that they're trying to share with me. So it's a like embodiment projection. I don't know how to quite word that, but on occasion, if I'm interacting with something and they're trying to share something with me, when I step into the experience, I'm literally stepping into it as if I'm them, as if I'm
mhm.
possessing their point of view or whatever in order to be shown whatever it is they're wanting me to understand about the situation. And so I'm not sure if what I in those instances, if what I was experiencing was a past life passing of my own, or if I
Mhm.
had been interacting with somebody who was trying to share that experience that they had had with me. That was a little unclear to me, but yeah, it was like living through it literally
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah, I'm a past life regression facilitator, and I think one of the most important things that we can all do for ourselves is have some sort of experience where you go through the death process.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's actually important, especially if you're going to do this kind of work, that you have some sort of actual experience, that you understand what's happening, and have that experience and that feeling to go along with it. So,
Yeah, it makes it a lot less scary.
yeah, absolutely, it does,
Yeah.
and you're also able to sort of, I don't know, from my perspective, it also helped me be able to understand some of the feelings that the people that I was working with to help transition were going through. It's like I'm able to pull up that wavelength and better match what's going on in order to help move the energy forward. So I don't know, I felt, to me it felt like it was an important part of the learning process to go through that experience.
In our modern societies, over the last maybe 10 years, maybe longer, I guess it probably
Mhm.
started in the 80s, but definitely in the last 10 years, there's been a gigantic surge in interest in shamanism, which and so I'm animist and I've been animist my whole life. And shamanism is basically, in my perspective, what you're talking about, walking in the spirit world and having a relationship with the non-physical realms.
Mhm.
Um, And I love that we're talking about this in non-spiritual language because I do think it's spiritual, but I do think that it's an everyday thing that everybody can do. I think it's what we are. It's who we are.
Mhm.
How has being able to do all of these things changed your everyday reality? Because you're not like most of the people walking around.
I definitely I feel like it's almost a difficult question for me to answer because, it started at such a young
Mhm.
age for me that I'm not sure who I would have been without it, if that makes sense. Like, uh, I for a long, long time, I was sort of in the closet about all of it because I didn't know how to express or how to communicate with people, regular people about what I was experiencing. So I just sort of kept it to myself. I just ended up being one of those people that takes long walks by themselves, but I never told anyone it was because I was friends with the trees.
Mm.
You know, I didn't quite know how to explain, that I would walk down the sidewalk with my eyes closed and guide myself by feeling the grass that was growing on either side of me as energy practice. It's how do you tell the people you work with about that? It was a very private part of my life for a long time. And I know my neighbor thought that I was weird when I knocked on his door and asked if I could have a piece of the tree that he had just cut down because it was a friend of mine and I wanted to be able to honor that and take it home with me and make it a part of my garden. I mean, I know he thought I was out of my mind for worrying about the fact that he cut down a tree on his property. Um, I don't know. I guess I learned how to be weird and not worry about it too much. I
I'm
didn't
guessing
have
that was kind of lonely though.
Yeah, I did not have, any kind of, a community or
Yeah,
practice or anything growing up. I mean, shamanism sounds amazing. I wish I knew anything about it, but it's not, it's not my culture and it's not my place to intrude, but it's, when you grow up a Western white chick in an agnostic family, there was
right.
no spiritual community around me, so I just sort of, I guess the others became my community, the trees became my community, the butterflies that fly past, it can be lonely, but it's also so not lonely
Yeah,
because
I get it.
I have experiences and friends and associates in so many more places than just here and in so many places where people don't see fellows and friends and fellow life forms. So in some ways I was limited socially, but in other ways I was a social butterfly
Mhm. Yeah.
with the rest of everything that's there in life that many people can't see. So
But I think the path has to be personal and experiential. So while you do have these traditions with pathways and traditions and rituals and all of that, that can be limiting too. So I'm really intrigued with the way that you have been able to cultivate all of that. Are there any mistakes to avoid? So somebody's interested, they want to do this, and what would you say? Like, okay, don't do
oh my god.
this.
Oh my gosh. I don't have books long enough to list all of my mistakes. Um, okay. Be mindful, I guess, is the most important thing that I can say. It's difficult when all you have is a human perspective to
Yeah.
understand that the broader perspectives that are out there are different. They it's their community and you don't know the rules. In my experience, communication on the other side is largely energetic. It's largely a psychic communication. And so oftentimes I never realized how rude I was being with my fear, like
Mm.
how ugly that must have felt for the energies that I was coming across, that I was afraid of them or that I was angry with them, or all of those kinds of feelings are not natural to their environment. They're not physical. there isn't the same kind of fear vibration there that there is here, and so I never realized how culturally ugly I was being with my energy in non-physical spaces. Um, Not intentionally, I'm just a clumsy human, like an ignorant tourist. I didn't know what I was doing, so it was never intentional, but I really feel that if you're going to start on an astral path, just understand that you're a tourist into someone else's land and be respectful and mindful of the personalities that you come across there, and really work on the energy control, that vibrational control for yourself. Strong negative feelings like anger and fear and all of that is not natural to their environment, and so it can feel very ugly to them if you're directing it at them.
I think it's really important to have a balance of spiritual life and physical life, and I see people who romanticize meditation or whatever their practice is, and like they're not physical, like they're not humans. Any advice on that for anybody who's struggling with that spirit life or other world slash physical balance?
I will tell you what I was told by an energy that I always called the golden-haired lady, just because that's how she always seemed to me. And once when I got angry with the golden-haired lady and wanted her to explain things to me, I was being an obstinate student of the universe in that moment, one of my many mistakes. She took me I yelled at her and left and woke myself up, and my energy was grabbed and pulled right back down in. And I found myself standing in a room in front of a painting, a large painting in a frame, and it was a horizontal landscape, and within that landscape, it was like the paint strokes were creating themselves over and over again. The whole thing was alive and moving and three-dimensional. Every atom of paint was making more paint. It was the most phenomenal thing that I had ever seen. And standing there watching it, I thought, "My god, how fabulous and how intricate and how amazing is this?" And then the painting floated up from the easel. It turned vertical, and the frame and the painting fell away to reveal the painting that was underneath it. And that painting was in a way that I don't even have words for. It was awe-inspiring, and I started to weep with the emotion of it, and from beside me, the golden-haired lady said, "Yes, that which lies beyond is astonishing, but it's behind the other one for a reason. You would do well to forget some of what you've seen." And at the time, I didn't quite process that, but the first painting, the beautiful landscape that continues to create and build on itself, that is the world we live in now. We were given that to express, to create, to build. It is a beautiful environment, and it's in front of the other one for a reason. So, balance. There's much to explore in the astral realms. But this life is a gift, and it was given to us to create and enjoy and express here for the time that we have while we're here. You'll have lots of time in the astral.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think we
ab
need to learn how to do this well.
yes, appreciate what you have here because it is an astonishing gift, this physical reality and this physical life. A beautiful opportunity to experience things in a way that non-physical doesn't experience. So,
So tell me about your YouTube channel. What's that about?
my YouTube channel is called Vibrational You, and I do all kinds of things on there. It's really just my little platform for expressing myself, and I'm learning to talk out loud about the things that I've experienced and share everything from manifestation practices to spiritual practices to uh, get my interpretation of things. It's come to my attention for you and through other people that I have a kind of a different way of talking about stuff because I wasn't spiritually indoctrinated in any way. So the words kind of come out of my mouth differently and I kind of have a different take on things. And so I just share some of that on there. And my experiences and my advice. So you can find that on YouTube. Again, it's called Vibrational You, and that's just you like university, because I think we're all here learning together how to be vibrational beings in a physical reality. So
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you sharing your journey and yourself and your work with us. Thanks.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.